I'd like to acknowledge first and foremost that we're gathered today on the unceded traditional territory of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish First Nations. As Bo said, my name is Renu Bakshi, and I'll be your MC tonight. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you very much for taking the time to be here for an important discussion. I'm starting with a story about my family, and it's a little bit vulnerable for me to talk about my family in the way that I'm about to. But here I go. My parents had an arranged marriage in India in the mid-60s, and with $7 in their pocket, they headed for Vancouver, to Canada, the promised land. And my dad got multiple jobs and worked very, very hard, and by 1973, before you know it, they had 4 daughters. Oh yeah, and my uncle, my dad's brother, had joined by then from India, and they decided that the big city was nowhere to raise girls. So they moved us to, it's true, that's actually why we left the city. We moved to the quote-unquote country, a farm on number 6 Road in Richmond, a blueberry farm. Technically, it's farmland. And if you talk to people in West Richmond, they'll tell you East Richmond is very much the country. So, and they went on to have yet another daughter, so there's 5 of us. We all worked very hard on the blueberry farm, and it was a nice place to grow up. We learned the value of hard work. But our life on the farm came to a pretty abrupt end. Something rather unexpected happened. My mom was healthy and 64, and she was diagnosed with terminal cancer and only given a few months to live. So while we were grappling with that reality, that we were losing the matriarch of our extended family, a realtor knocked on our door, and he said he had a buyer for our blueberry farm. And my uncle told the realtor that the farm was not for sale. But confronting the reality that Mom would be leaving us soon, we decided that maybe it was time to move on. So we sold the farm. My mom passed away, and we moved off of the farm all in a matter of weeks. And that was in 2010. 7 years later, where our small little house stood, where an extended family once lived, is a 30,000 square foot home. And nobody has harvested the blueberries since 2010. That's when we left. Obviously, change was just not enough for me in 2010. That's when I decided to leave CTV as well. And eventually I launched myself as a communications strategist. And since then, I find myself working with a lot of real estate developers, and I think that's because the conversation over the last few years has changed. How real estate developers communicate, when they communicate, and with whom they communicate has all evolved. And that's because there's a lot of voices right now fighting to be part of the housing narrative, fighting to set that agenda, be the loudest, and be the one that affects change. NIMBYs, YIMBYs, activists, protesters, families, millennials, even anarchists are out now, trying to find a voice in the housing conversation. And with generational and cultural values changing as they have, and the economic reality being such that it is now, leadership, nobody will argue that leadership now is more imperative than ever before. But what does leadership look like? There's a spectrum. Some elected officials, they think they know what's best for the community, they do it on intuition, on data, they push through what they want, and they get it done. On the other end of the spectrum, you have elected officials who take community feedback, host town halls, public consultations, and make an informed decision based on what they believe the community is looking for. Which type of leadership is right? Is there a right and a wrong? Is there room for protests, and are town halls effective? These are questions we're going to be asking tonight as we are confronting consensus. Thank you.